Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and fellow industry leaders, welcome to our panel discussion on digital transformation frontiers in finance. Today, we are privileged to have three distinguished CEOs who are at the heart of the innovation and already shaping tomorrow's future for financial services landscape. As we delve into the transformation power of technology in reshaping the financial sector, I encourage us all to explore the opportunities, challenges, and the future of finance in an increasingly digital world. Rula, Emmanuel Damien, thanks for joining us in. As we embark on our exploration of the digital frontiers in financial services, let's begin by delving into the fascinating realm of digital assets. From cryptocurrencies to tokenized securities, the rise of digital assets is reshaping how we perceive and interact with traditional finance. Today, we have the opportunity to dissect the implications, opportunities, and challenges that come with this revolutionary wave of innovation. Rula, how do you see digital assets and the technology trends impacting the future of trade in the near future?
Thank you. Well, thank you first for inviting me to be a panelist on this forum and with my esteemed panelist guests. Look, we look at digital assets as creating a revolution because it will create more efficiency, transparency, and accessibility. And definitely in today's world, you need that innovation. We have seen the blockchain, how it has it creates real time and in few seconds. How it will make sure that every party has its documents, and we have also seen how the UAE as a government has been home to digital assets, crypto assets, as well as blockchain, which helps in the regulations, and they've put forward the regulations, and having these regulations here, it drives the platforms of a number of companies being established here. So from that basis, we think this is the future for these digital assets.
So, Rhoda, you said indeed UAE is fast becoming a hub for fintechs in the digital asset space. Emmanuel, how will the consumer benefit from this, and how ADGM is supporting in the incubation and the empowerment of these fintechs coming into the UAE?
Thank you. Well, consumers can benefit from a number of aspects, from simple speed, time, efficiency, to cost, to even security. As a regulator, what we want to make sure is that that's done in a safe, sound, and transparent fashion. And we've done that from the early days of our 2018 digital asset framework that we launched, which included a number of different types of digital assets, as we like to reference it, because we tackle virtual assets, which are crypto. We tackle digital securities, as well as fiat-backed tokens and derivatives, etc. So we've looked at it from a risk-based approach. So when we developed our regulatory framework in 2018, we looked at what are the key risks around, for example, virtual assets. And some of those key risks were pretty obvious. The first one being AML. So ensuring that money laundering, terrorist financing was not utilised through the services or sale and use of virtual assets. So that was one of the first areas that our framework tackled. Another key area was around custody and client assets, or security around those assets, to make sure that if someone's wallet was not being attacked or pilfered, it was being protected. Another area was around exchanges, so exchange operations, making sure that if there is an exchange that is, for example, selling and buying and selling spot virtual assets, that's done, again, in a safe, transparent fashion, with the proper market exchange operations being important. The other key area that we put a lot of emphasis around was around tech governance. So ensuring that the technology could actually achieve what the vision was around virtual assets. So we spent a lot of time around that. And that comes from building expertise within the regulator. So it's not just about building regulations, it's about having regulators who can actually execute on those regulations. But that comes from working with industry. So we like to say that from a regulatory perspective, we engage with industry, because by engagement with industry, we can learn as much as we can also help the industry learn about how regulators approach these things. The other area is regulatory cooperation. So we work with other regulatory agencies around the world in relation to digital assets. We talk to each other, we share thoughts and ideas. But importantly, we also liaise with and work with international standard setters in relation to these matters, including IOSCO, for example. So we take our role as a regulator very seriously. We're here to protect investors and users of our market, but we also want the market to thrive. So the only way you can do that is to engage both sides. So I'll stop there. But we've done a lot on the regulatory side. We will do a lot more. I can touch upon some of those a bit later.
I think we're providing a very good space for these fintechs to come in, and we're seeing the numbers growing like crazy. And this is becoming the main hub, basically, for all fintechs that want to focus on digital assets.
And I just want to add something. And because of how ADGM were ahead of the curve in positioning themselves as basically a home for laying the regulations for digital assets, that's why we as Standard Chartered came forward and established our SC Ventures, our ventures arm in ADGM, and have many other ventures opening, which are more on cryptocurrency platforms. So having the regulation a step ahead helps a lot.
Indeed. Damien, token financing has the opportunity to change the world economy drastically. Security tokens will enable organizations to bring real-world assets online, and DeFi aims basically to replace all existing financial services by decentralized basically ecosystem. How do you see the impact on DeFi, on society, and the wider ecosystem in finance?
Thank you, Sean, and good morning to the delegates. I think if that is the ambition of the industry, the blockchain, the token industry, and I think we all recognize that there are many, many valuable use cases within that. I think there are a number of challenges for the industry to explore and execute on before we will get to see that coming into mainstream. Because really what we're talking about here, when statements are made such as it will change financial services, we're talking about a global industry that connects multiple billions of people. So I think there are some fundamental challenges. And I'll go through a few of them now from our perspective. First one is translation. What do I mean by translation? Our industry, excluding blockchain and cryptos, has a history of being very inside-out looking. That means we use our own terminology and then push that into the marketplace, and typically over the years would want to think that our clients will accept that and adopt that. And I think when we look at blockchain and tokenization, there's an even bigger challenge there. On the way up here today from Dubai, I listened to 2 or 3 podcasts around DeFi and tokenization. I'm not an expert by any means, but I have been working on the fringes for a number of years. And what struck me is that it's very difficult for them to translate what they're doing to an ordinary consumer. So I think that's a real challenge for them. What's the use case? What's the benefit of the use case? How can it be used on a mass adoption basis? I think that's a huge challenge. And I know there's lots of people here within that segment of the industry. But I would really say an observation from personally from my side and from Saxo is that we really need to work much, much harder on translating what the use cases are. The second one is trust. What we do on a daily basis for all of us is really embedded with the foundation of trust, whether that's traditional banking or insurance or traditional financial services. And I think when you're introducing something new into a marketplace, which is hopefully a global marketplace, it's absolutely essential and mandatory that you build trust. Because we've seen a number of examples in the past 2 or 3 years where things have not turned out particularly well in this new segment of the industry. I think it's absolutely critical that we build that trust, and that trust is not only to regulators such as Emmanuel, but it's also trust across the financial services ecosystem. So that's other banking partners, other counterparties, to get to a point where there's enough trust in the system that we can move from, let's say, the old way of doing things onto the new way of doing things. I think to take the view that we're going to take one giant leap from the current system, the multi-counterparty system and multi-regulator system, into a completely decentralized system, I think that's a really challenging leap to do that.
Damien, there was always this, I would say, statement that some believe these are solutions and we're trying to find the problems.
Yeah.
You're discussing use cases.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you a believer that we still didn't really find the problem and we're still exploring the use cases? It's mostly experiments driven, or that is really a problem that we need to solve and requires decentralization?
I think that's a very relevant point to raise, because I think we're all aware that in certain government services, for example, real estate ledgers, etc., the blockchain can be very, very useful. It can save time, it can save cost. It's a relatively limited ecosystem, so therefore it's a very, very useful application. I think if we're then trying to talk about how will it disrupt and change what we have today, then a question that could be posed is, what is wrong with what we have today? So what is the problem we're trying to solve for? And again, I think when it comes to use cases, that's where I think the industry needs to get much, much better about explaining what the existing problem is and how the new solution coming in will solve that and make things and add value within that potential area. So I think, again, that's one of my points about the challenge for the industry. Another one would be portability. And what I mean by portability is that if we look at the traditional markets, for example, if I'm talking global investment markets, then many providers around the world, not just platforms like ourselves at Saxo, but multiple banks and wealth providers, have access to global markets, which means that their clients can access multiple asset classes in multiple markets around the world. And you can do that quite easily because the custody and settlement infrastructure is now been tested for decades, and that works quite well. Again, from a personal perspective, I have been dipping my toe into different crypto assets and altcoins over the last 10 years. And I was speaking to somebody earlier at the coffee break. I've had examples in the last 6 months where I've held certain assets in certain wallets because at the time of purchasing those assets, they were the only wallets that were available. And then when they've closed down, to transfer those assets into another custody provider is not simple. It's difficult. So again, I think it's just another element of the challenges that the industry faces. It really wants to make a material disruption into what we see today as traditional finance services.
Thanks, Damien. So as we transition from digital assets frontiers, let's dive into the realm of artificial intelligence. Some are saying today AI sooner or later is gonna be really managing everything around us. And if we link it to currency, AI would never be able to manage physical currency. So digital currency is going to be an integral part of the future when it comes to AI managing our systems, our ecosystem, making decisions on our behalf, or even advising us on certain areas. Emmanuel, Gen AI holds really a big promise today for the regulators, and we're seeing a lot of investments in RegTech and SubTech. And Gen AI is really giving us this promise that today there is something that can really help us progress through. Well, what's your views on Gen AI? I mean, what is really happening in the background of ADGM when it comes to innovation in this space?
Thanks, John. Well, we've sort of been looking at AI for some time as a regulatory body. Back in 2016, when we launched our fintech framework and our sandbox, it was an area that was starting to really take shape anyway back then. And so we were starting to look at how we could utilize it. In 2020, we launched a program called Open Regs, which was in essence our attempt to not only digitize our regulatory framework, in particular the financial services framework, but then utilize AI to create a RegTech solution over that legislation. So if you had a particular activity that you wanted to conduct, the AI could assist you in reviewing the framework and giving you a package of discrete information on how to comply with that regulatory framework for that activity. So we started looking at that quite some time ago. Even before that, I remember back in 2015, 2016, we were talking about things like robo-advisory and AI being the basis of that robo-advisory. In essence, that's what it is. So as a regulator, in the last few years, we've really launched a few different projects around AI. Some of them are coming closer and closer to fruition. Others be more long-term. But I'll give you an example of a few. For example, the first one is one where we're going to try to utilize AI to do application assessment. And when I say that, I'm talking about the initial risk assessment of an application that we receive. So it'll do a first review. In essence, it's a risk analyzer. That's what we're calling it. And that will then assist us in determining what are the key areas to look at with these applications. So that's one. Another one is in relation to supervision. So we receive a lot of data from our firms, quarterly, half-yearly, annual. That data comes in a number of different formats. It can be financial data, it can be other information as well, including audit reports. So we're going to use AI to assist us as supervisors to analyze that data and really be more focused into what are the real risks that are occurring within our ecosystem, and really sharpen our focus on those and go after those risks and make sure that those risks, in essence, don't get out of hand. So that's a really important piece of work that we're doing. Another piece of work that we're doing is what I mentioned earlier, which we called open regs. We're now working on that because we've inputted a lot of information into that system. We're working with MBZ AI University to develop that further, and we're calling it a Reg Buddy. And in essence, it's going to be a RegTech tool to assist compliance officers and other entities and stakeholders, including ourselves, in really helping taking a particular business model, putting it into the system, and really helping analyze the full framework and how it relates to that business model. So in a very fast, time-efficient manner. It gets done already now, but we're talking about the speed of this happening, which reduces cost as well, because you get quicker time to market, right? Another area that we're working on right now that we've had some good results is translation. And it goes both ways, but very complicated Arabic text, for example, legal text. We're using the AI systems to translate that into English. So that is a really fascinating piece, because in the past, to translate legislation, in particular Arabic legislation, for example, it's not that simple. So we're getting some really good results on that. But so we're doing a lot on AI. We see it as a tool. Our view is that it's a tool that will lead us into being a far more innovative, progressive regulator. But in essence, what does that mean? We're going to be able to review a lot more. Our scope is going to get bigger. We're going to be very focused on what the key risks are at any time throughout a course of a year or a decade. And so that means our not only our engagement will be more focused, but our results will be more focused too.
Great. So every opportunity has a dark side. So the first day I remember when we heard about Gen AI, next day deepfake was top of the news. So and it's a scary future. We can no longer really understand the integrity of the content. It's so accurate to a point where you doubt. We're using Gen AI in customer engagement interfaces. This will be interfacing with our customers. So cyber criminals will surely use this in a way or another. But Damien, how do you see this evolving, and what are the frameworks that are needed to really leverage AI in the near future in a responsible, I would say, and an ethical way, and not really get everyone scared from?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some form of regulatory oversight in terms of the development and the pace of development and the application of AI. If I look at ourselves, we actually have a very focused AI security team within the bank, really for two reasons. The first reason is the data protection, the content integrity, but also identity integrity as well. Interestingly, our head of this unit a couple of months ago presented on the global call for the bank, and he'd used some of our AI tools to impersonate and mimic our chief investment officer. And it was quite scary, because had I not been told up front that this was an exercise that he'd undertaken, I would have 98% said that it was our chief investment officer. So on the AI front, this dedicated unit that we have looks at two things. It looks about defense, to ensure that we can maintain our client integrity, identity. On the content front as well, there is potential abuse. Even if we have a look at ChatGPT, which I think everybody is using as a major tool, there is an element of ChatGPT that you can use filters to streamline what you want as an output within ChatGPT. So again, I would completely echo your point around that application of AI, that we need some form of control and governance, and whether that's at individual financial firm level or whether that's at a regulatory level. But I think we need to be very cognizant about the fact that it can't be misused, and undoubtedly it will be misused by the darker side of society going forward. And then the second side of AI from our perspective, which is what we've been using now for some time, is very much along the lines of increasing efficiency, reducing cost and complexity. So really to use AI tools to do the heavy lifting when it comes to data-heavy disciplines, to do the heavy lifting, and then we pass that over probably still today to a human element who does the editorial lens. And that could be anything from our process flows internally, where we're looking to STP, straight through process, as much as we can to make things quicker. We're actually actively using it in our content creation, because we do provide content to our clients from our strategy team. So what AI is able to do is it's able to do that first draft, as Emmanuel said, the first translation of content, and you're able to do that in a much more scalable basis. And then rather having to produce the content from ground to ceiling, you can just have somebody within the team edit that and then push that out. And the third thing we're doing on a more practical side now is that we're actually using AI and that content engine to help our relationship managers. So relationship managers for our VIP clients or our high net worth clients, to allow them to move from a one-to-one human-to-human model into a one-to-many model. So again, they can use our content creator, which is powered by our AI tools and engines, to be able to produce content that can be distributed on a one-to-many basis, which is slightly changing our distribution model, because it means that one resource has more bandwidth to talk to our clients. And we're using that in that way, and we're seeing great results from that.
Damien, everyone is looking at productivity, automation, and this is sitting at the top, I would say, agenda of all the executives in banks, Rula. How do you see banks are going to make this a reality?
So every bank has its digital journey at a different stage, some at an early, some in the mid, and some are way advanced. I mean, we have in Standard Chartered have embarked on this journey since 2015, and we invest every year in our digital journey across the products as well as our systems. But at the same time, as you digitize, you need to really improve on your controls and cybersecurity to avoid any hacking. And then you have the AIs, where you need to, how do you include AI part of your journey? How do you make the process for your customers efficient and smooth? But digitization is an annual exercise, and it will never stop, because new ideas, you need to be ahead of the curve. And as traditional banks, they have to move faster because they have the old systems, whereas you have digital banks coming up, purely digital end-to-end. So how do you manage that balance? Now, if I look at the traditional banks, we try and always include basically the digital platforms where to educate the customers to basically do their whether it is their wealth management products, to be able to do them on their apps fully and educate them. Now we would use AI to come in to talk about, to push some products based on understanding the client needs. Documentation and legal is one thing that we're looking at where you can use AI, but it does need some editing, of course. But it is all about how do you make sure you're ahead of the curve and making sure that that our clients understand that digitization is the way forward. Now, not all clients want to deal with a robot. A lot of the clients, like your private banking clients, they want face-to-face, especially if it's a complex transaction. They would want to understand that transaction to protect them from any risk and understand the downside and the upside. So from that angle, you would have to find that right balance because you will have a future generation. They would want fully digital and they will do everything on their app. And then you will have the other generation, they would want to meet their private banking clients. So you'll need to keep both. You cannot just go fully digital. Now, at Standard Chartered, we already have 2 digital banks, one in Hong Kong, one in Singapore, and they're purely digital. And then we have our digital bank in 9 markets in Africa. And across where we are present in retail in 6, 7 other markets, we find that balance where we encourage our customers to use our mobile apps, and that's why we're at 70-80% digitization. We also encourage our corporate clients to digitize when it comes to their cash and trade, and this is where we would use the API and open banking for the client. So it's finding that right balance, but definitely moving forward, because you cannot just rely on the old traditional banking models.
Great. So Damien, if you look at the evolution, brick and mortar, digital channels, embedded finance, where do you see us heading in this financial services landscape?
I think that, and picking up on Lola's comments there, I think undoubtedly that it's about finding a balance. Now, even if I'm just looking at the digital distribution side of our industry, within the digital distribution side, it's not quite as simple as just saying we'll have a web-based platform or an app, because within your client base, you've got different clients who want to be treated in different ways, different communication channels with different products and services. So as an example, Saxo has been a digital operator, or let's say a web-based operator, since it was set up 30 years ago. We have different platforms for different client types. So we have a platform that is very much focused on clients who are in the very early stages of their investment or wealth journey. So we have to be very careful that we're not exposing them to products or services which they haven't been educated on yet and they don't understand, and therefore there's a risk in doing that. So we have a very focused platform for people who would say are in the early investor type life cycle. And then we have a completely different platform which is targeted to professional traders or people who are very experienced with their policies. Even with that, then we have different offices in different markets. So for example, in Europe, about 80% of our clients connect with us via desktop. Here in the UAE, 85% of our clients connect with us via mobile. So we have to produce the same content and experiences on 2 different types of infrastructure, with 2 different types of looks and feels and 2 different types of delivery mechanisms. So even within a digital platform first bank, which Saxo is, we still have to constantly look at, that's fine, that's our headline as to what people see when they talk about Saxo. But how do we segment that for our different client types based on their preferences, based on their education levels, and based on how they want to connect with us? So it's an ongoing day-to-day evolution, and we've done some of it very well. We've done some of it not so well, and we need to keep looking at that on a day-to-day basis.
Emmanuel, do you see metaverse part of this evolution somewhere? So we discussed this quickly last week, but is this evolution, the way you see it, is something that we're going to push us more into virtual interaction, or you're still a believer that as a consumer, human interaction is going to be needed in such complex transactions where trust is key?
I'll try to answer this from a regulator's perspective. I think the metaverse is one aspect of the new digital future, and it's something that we will monitor. But I think ultimately all these systems and tools are created so human beings can interact and do transactional business with each other, whether that's retail, whether that's commercial. So as a regulator, we want to make sure that we're able to regulate that environment to ensure that both sides of the equation, in essence, are protected, but in particular investors. But we want to make sure that the marketplace has integrity and credibility. So whether that's in a digital space or whether that's in a physical space, to me, they're both important. So I talked earlier about AI and how it can help us as regulators through a subtech solution, and we have a number of those that we're working on, as I described earlier. We're also working to develop regtech solutions for industry in partnership with them, and academia for that matter. Some of the things that we're also working on is to better understand how different aspects of digital assets can be evolved. So we're looking at how the securities industry uses digital assets. We already have, for example, a tokenized carbon credit exchange fully regulated in ADGM. So we're not a regulatory agency or an ecosystem that is not up to speed, so to speak. We feel as though we're innovative and progressive, but what does that mean? That means that you're actually seeing people utilizing your regulations which you've developed, which are innovative and progressive. So for us, that's really important. Going forward into the future, we see stable coins being an area that will develop further. We're looking in particular around areas around fiat-backed tokens versus asset-backed tokens, because they are different. So you'll see a lot more development in that space going forward. We have a very, very, very strong and comprehensive framework around digital assets, around fintech, but we will continue to grow on that. We're not going to rest on our laurels. Another area that we're looking really carefully on is staking and virtual assets generally, where they're moving to in the future, as not only as an asset, but potentially as a payment. But don't forget, stable coins are not just being used for payment systems, they're also being used for trading systems, and they're also being used as potential investments. So we're looking at all those aspects. We already have a great framework and bedrock, and we will keep building on that. So one other thing that I'll finish on, and we mentioned this earlier, was around DeFi and Web3. And as a regulator, they're really challenging for us, because if you think about DeFi, is there one central control that a regulator can license that can actually protect if something goes wrong? When you're in a DeFi environment, you're potentially working in an anonymous environment. There's no true controller. So if there is anonymity and there's fraud with that anonymity, like a rug pull, for example, what happens to the users of that DeFi system? Where do they find recourse? As a regulator, that's what keeps me up at night, to make sure that we protect the users of the system ultimately. So
We've seen, if you've seen the Central Bank of the UAE, as well as in cooperation with Hong Kong, China and Thailand, They're working closely on the central bank digital currency. That alone is a breakthrough. And we're part of, among other banks, part of this consortium in the testing phase. But this is all to really smooth the customer experience and make it much more efficient and as much as possible real time.
So, Rula, you discussed in your previous interaction the balance between traditional channels, digital channels, embedded channels. We discussed also, if you look at the outlook in the past 5 years, we have large banks across Europe and the US started to minimize their branch network, and then suddenly they realized, no, we're making a bit of a mistake. We look into this aspect. We're discussing now customer experience. How do you feel everything will plug together in the coming 3 years?
How will it come together?
So between customer experience, these balances.
At the end of the day, it is very important to make sure that you have a very smooth and efficient customer experience. Now, if you look at, and in banking, you also need to look at the future generations. What do they want? You have to cater for their needs. They will not want to go into branches and the bricks and mortars. They want to do everything digitally. They will do the crypto, and they will definitely have different asset classes to invest in. So as banks, we need to make sure that we find that balance to cater for this, but we cannot stand still and do the traditional old banking way. But in whatever we do, we have to make sure that our controls, our risks, and our systems are fully up to date, because you need to make sure that there's no your cybersecurity systems are up to date. But if you look at banking, the future is digitization, digital, whether it's in most of the products in banking, and that's not consumer, as well as corporate. We have seen it in COVID. COVID was an eye-opener. If we did not have the digital capabilities, we could not, when the customers were at home, the corporate customers, it would have been difficult to continue their day-to-day working capital trade business. And that's why the fact that they were on already digital platforms that enabled them to continue with their business operation and cater for their exports and imports from their home till they came back to office, that is a test. And that was an eye-opener to a lot of our customers that did not want to move to digitization, fearing that it will really lower the controls and make their company operation more vulnerable. So digitization is the future, but it has to be, you need the customers to be on board.
Great. I hope everyone you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. Rula, Emmanuel, Damien, thanks for your time.